My name is Marina Caldwell. I'm 26 years old, and Thanksgiving has a way of exposing things people spend the rest of the year pretending don't exist. Maybe it's the forced gratitude, maybe it's the performative kindness, or maybe it's just the way families gather around one table and silently keep score. I should have known better than to show up this year. But some foolish part of me still believed that if I walked through that front door, if I smiled enough, stayed calm enough, stayed small enough, things might feel the way they used to. Back before secrets became currency. Back before my mother learned how to look straight through me, like I was just background noise in the story she preferred to tell. I'm not particularly exciting. I work a stable but soul-numbing job in cybersecurity. I like true crime podcasts and fixing old things that other people have given up on. I live alone. I don't post much. I don't demand attention, which in my family apparently makes me invisible. I used to be the golden child, the dependable one, the daughter my mother bragged about at church luncheons. Straight A's, scholarships, so mature for her age. That version of me disappeared the moment my younger brother Evan realized charm could replace accountability. Evan is 2 years younger than me and has always been magnetic, the kind of person who walks into a room and somehow becomes the center without trying. Or maybe he tries very hard and just makes it look effortless. Either way, people orbit him, especially my mother. And when Evan started dating Lucas, everything shifted. Lucas is polished, confident, always smells like expensive cologne and talks as if he's never doubted himself a day in his life. He fixes things just well enough to earn praise. He offers advice no one asked for, and my mother adores him. Lucas taught Evan how to cook risotto. Lucas fixed the sink. Lucas suggested I aim higher in my career. It was like watching myself get replaced by a shinier, more socially acceptable version. I didn't confront it. I never do. I just started noticing, writing things down, quietly logging every comparison, every subtle dig, every time my name was used as a cautionary tale. I called it my Lucas log. Not because I planned to use it, but because it reassured me that I wasn't imagining things. 10 days before Thanksgiving, my phone buzzed. Dinner's at 3, hurry. Bring dessert. Mom. No greeting, no warmth, just instructions. I stared at the message longer than I should have. Not because it surprised me, but because it hurt in a way that still caught me off guard. She used to call me her little hero, used to ask me for help picking Evan's birthday gifts because you understand him best. Now I was just the person who forgot whipped cream last year. I sent back a thumbs up. She didn't respond. My family is obsessed with appearances. Thanksgiving is my mother's Super Bowl. Table runners, place cards, 3 kinds of stuffing, extended relatives, church acquaintances, people she barely knows but desperately wants approval from. And of course, Lucas gets the best seat. The week before Thanksgiving, something strange happened. I was waiting at an auto shop when my phone buzzed with an airdrop request. I declined it. Then another came through, and another. The last one slipped through before I could stop it. It was blurry, but I recognized 2 things instantly. Evan's handwriting, and Lucas's name, next to a number. A large number, with a $sign. That was when I started digging. I don't like being lied to, and I especially don't like being made to feel like I'm losing my grip on reality. So I did what I always do when something doesn't add up. I stayed quiet. I collected everything. Screenshots, backups, files. I saved them in a folder labeled Holiday Recipes. Thanksgiving morning, I baked an apple pie from scratch. Not because anyone asked, but because it gave my hands something to do while my mind spiraled. I even carved a small leaf pattern into the crust. It smelled like nostalgia, like effort, like something no one would notice. I left early. Traffic was awful. When I finally pulled into my mother's driveway, the house looked perfect, magazine-worthy. For a split second, I felt hopeful. Then the door opened, and everything started to crack. Before I even made it inside, I heard my uncle's voice. "Wow," Uncle Raymond boomed from the doorway, already half a beer in. "Didn't think you'd actually come this year." I stopped at the bottom step pie, balanced carefully in both hands like it was something fragile, because apparently I was. "What do you mean?" I asked. He smirked. "After last time." Last time. I replayed the 4th of July in my head. The barbecue where he got blackout drunk, knocked over the grill, and somehow the story turned into me being too sensitive for leaving early. Somehow I was always the problem, the common denominator, the inconvenience everyone politely tolerated. I forced a smile and climbed the steps. That's when my mother appeared. Marina, she said, not unkindly but not warmly either. The way you greet a coworker you barely know. We weren't sure you'd show. I held up the pie. I brought dessert. She glanced at it like it was a receipt she didn't remember asking for. We already have plenty. Oh, behind her I heard Evan laugh. That familiar, effortless sound, light, unbothered, confident that the room belonged to him. And next to him stood Lucas, tall, relaxed, head tilted slightly down as he scrolled on his phone like none of this mattered, because it didn't. Not to him. I thought I had a seat, I said, shifting the pie in my arms. My mother's smile tightened. Lucas's parents decided to stop by last minute. We had to make some adjustments. You understand, she added, already moving past me. Evan leaned against the wall, arms crossed. It's just one meal, Marina. Don't make it weird. I was still standing on the porch. No one had stepped aside. No one had taken the pie. No one had invited me in. Uncle Raymond took another sip of beer. You always bring drama, he said casually. Maybe sitting this one out is best. And then I saw it. My mother reaching behind her, grabbing a chair, my chair, and handing it to Lucas. He didn't even look up, just nodded once and sat. Something in my chest collapsed so quietly I almost missed it. No argument, no raised voices, no scene. I turned around, walked back down the steps, got into my car. The pie sat on the passenger seat, perfectly intact, steam fogging the plastic lid. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, breathing slowly, counting, until the shaking in my hands stopped. Then I opened my phone. The folder. Holiday recipes. I chose one screenshot. Just one. Not the most damning. Not the full story. Just enough to raise questions no one could ignore. I sent it to the family group chat. No message, no explanation. Just dropped it there like a match. I didn't drive away right away. I watched my phone light up. First Evan, then my mother, then cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. What is this delete that now? This better be fake. The screenshot was simple. A scanned check. Payable to Evan. $14,000. Memo line partial advance. We'll explain later. Signed by my grandfather. My grandfather whose estate was still in probate. My grandfather whose money was supposedly untouched. I didn't say a word. I started the car and pulled out of the driveway as the messages escalated from confusion to panic. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. A private message. From Lucas. This is low. Really low. I didn't respond. Because guilt had already turned into anger. Because revealing the truth always looks cruel to people who benefit from silence. By the time I got home, it was dark. My apartment was quiet cold. I placed the pie in the fridge without opening it. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, my phone rang at 8:12 a.m. It was my aunt, and the questions were just beginning. My Aunt Clara never calls me. She's the type who sends reaction emojis instead of messages and considers that staying connected. So when my phone lit up with her name the morning after Thanksgiving, I knew something had shifted. Marina, she said quietly, like she didn't want to be overheard. Can you send me that screenshot again? I didn't ask why. I sent it. Within an hour, 3 more cousins messaged me. Not accusatory this time. Curious. Careful. The tone had changed. Because the thing about lies is they depend on everyone playing their part. And once one person steps out of line, the whole performance starts to wobble. By noon, the family group chat had split into 2. One thread was pure chaos, denial, anger, frantic attempts to explain things away. The other was private messages. People asking questions they'd clearly been sitting on for a while. When Grandpa passed away last year, everything had been quiet. Too quiet. No will reading, no clear numbers. Just vague reassurances that everything was being handled fairly. My mother had been named executor, and no one challenged it because why would they? She was the responsible one, the devoted daughter, the woman who hosted Bible study and remembered birthdays. But that check changed the math. Evan wasn't just getting an advance. He'd taken more than his share, and he hadn't done it alone. By that evening, my cousin Noah called me. You weren't wrong, he said without preamble. Something's off. Probate rules don't allow early payouts like that. Especially not without documentation. I leaned back against my kitchen counter phone pressed to my ear. I know. You planned this, he said slowly. Not accusing, just observing. I waited, I corrected. There's a difference. The real explosion came later that night. I posted a second image to the group chat. An email chain. Short, polite, damning. Evan asking for temporary help with a business idea. My grandfather reluctantly agreeing. My mother CC'd. Aware. Silent. And then the part that made my hands go cold, a smaller transfer. $500 to Lucas, labeled marketing support. The chat imploded. People left. Messages disappeared. New ones popped up accusing me of betrayal, of airing private matters, of trying to destroy the family. Evan called me 3 times. I didn't answer. He sent a voice note. I saved it without listening. Insurance. The next day, there was a family meeting. I didn't respond to the invite, but I showed up. I wore black not to be dramatic, but because it felt honest. Everyone was there except Evan and Lucas. My mother looked smaller somehow, tired. Her hands trembled when she poured coffee. Uncle Raymond looked annoyed, like this was an inconvenience rather than a reckoning. The meeting was 2 hours of circular arguments. It was a misunderstanding. He meant to pay it back. We didn't think it mattered. Then Noah pulled up an email from the probate attorney. No funds were to be released. No exceptions. No ambiguity. My mother's voice faltered. He made a mistake. I finally spoke. So did you, I said calmly, when you gave my seat away. Silence. She looked at me like she hadn't realized I was still capable of speaking. That wasn't personal, she said. We had to make adjustments. You didn't have to do anything, I replied. You chose to. I stood up. I'm done explaining myself, I said. You all get to live with the choices you made. I left before anyone could stop me. That night, my phone buzzed again. A message. From Lucas. We need to talk. I know things you don't. My stomach dropped. Because Lucas wasn't smart enough to bluff. And arrogant people only confess when they're scared. I didn't respond. Not yet. But I knew one thing for certain. This was far from over. I stared at Lucas's message for 10 full minutes. We need to talk. I know things you don't. It sat there on my screen like a loaded gun. I'd spent my entire life being underestimated, overlooked, dismissed, quietly pushed aside. But Lucas wasn't the type to reach out unless he felt the ground cracking beneath him. At 2:13 a.m., my phone buzzed again. A paragraph. No punctuation. Rushed. Panicked. Evan made me cash the checks. Both of them. I didn't want to, but he said your mom knew. Said it was early access. Said you'd probably find out eventually anyway. If I said anything, he'd say it was my idea. I have screenshots. I want to send them, but not here. I exhaled slowly. What unsettled me wasn't the confession, it was that Lucas thought I was the safe one. The person they'd iced out on Thanksgiving was now the only person he trusted. I replied with one word. Talk. We agreed to meet the next afternoon at a coffee shop halfway between our apartments. Neutral territory. Public. Safe. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my couch, replaying years of small moments I'd brushed off. The comments, the looks, the subtle rewrites of history. It all started fitting together like a puzzle I'd been pretending not to solve. Lucas showed up late. No designer jacket, no confident smile. Just a hoodie, dark circles under his eyes, and a manila envelope clutched so tightly his knuckles were white. He slid it across this table without a word. Inside were screenshots, Venmo transactions, text messages, photos. One of them stopped my breath. Evan holding a check flipping off the camera. Date stamp. 3 days after Grandpa's funeral. She said she deserved it, Lucas muttered, stirring his coffee even though he hadn't added anything to it. Said she was the only one who visited him in the hospital. I clenched my jaw. I had visited him. Quietly. Without cameras. Without posting about it. What do you want from me? I asked. Lucas looked up for the first time. I want out. Of Evan, of your family, of all of it. I should have left a year ago, but your mom loved me, and I liked being someone. There it was. I walked out of that cafe with the envelope tucked under my arm, feeling like I was carrying something radioactive. That night I didn't go home. I sat on a bench at a park under a bare tree cold wind, cutting through my coat, and finally admitted something to myself. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a pattern. The next few weeks were quiet. Too quiet. Evan and Lucas broke up. I only knew because Evan erased him from social media and posted a cryptic story about choosing self-respect. I spiraled. Stopped going to the gym, skipped work meetings, ate whatever was easiest. I was depressed. Rock bottom has a strange clarity to it. When there's nothing left to lose, you stop pretending. One morning in early January, I opened my fridge and found the pie. Still untouched. Mold creeping along the crust. I threw it away. Cleaned the sink. Opened my laptop. And decided to rebuild. Rebuilding didn't happen all at once. It started with small, almost invisible decisions, the kind that don't feel brave when you make them just necessary. I quit my job. Not dramatically. No speech, no burning bridges. I gave notice, wrapped up my projects, and walked out of that glass building feeling lighter than I had in years. I'd been coasting there, telling myself stability was the same thing as safety. It wasn't. It was just another way to stay quiet. I started freelancing. Small cybersecurity jobs, website cleanups, back-end fixes for local businesses that couldn't afford big firms. At first I was broke. Instant noodles for dinner broke. Counting coins broke. But the work was mine. The hours were mine. And for the first time, no one was comparing me to anyone else. I canceled Christmas. Didn't go. Didn't call. Didn't explain. Noah texted once. "I miss you." I replied, "I'm not gone. I just need space." He understood. In January, I started therapy. That part doesn't fit neatly into revenge stories. There's no montage, no instant breakthrough. Just sitting in my living room, laptop open, listening to a calm woman named Dr. Meera Patel ask questions no one ever had. When did you first feel like love was conditional? What happens when you imagine saying no? Why do you think you waited so long to speak? I told her everything. About my mother's favoritism, about Evan learning early that charm could replace accountability, about Thanksgiving, about the chair. Every week something loosened inside me. I started running again, just a mile at first, then 2. Old podcasts in my ears, cold air burning my lungs in a way that felt grounding instead of painful. Clients started referring me. One sent a thank you mug with "World's Okayest Hacker" printed on it. I laughed harder than I had in months. And then in early March, Noah called. "You need to see this," he said. He sent me screenshots. Aunt Clara had petitioned for a third-party audit of Grandpa's estate. The court approved it. What they found wasn't just Evan's early withdrawal. There was a second account. Small transfers, monthly, carefully hidden, enough to fund Evan's lifestyle without raising alarms. The executor's name was on every authorization. My mother. I stared at the screen, waiting for anger. It didn't come. What I felt instead was terrifying clarity. This wasn't about favoritism anymore. This was about control, about entitlement, about rewriting reality and expecting everyone else to play along. I closed the app and sat back in my chair. For the first time in my life, I didn't just want peace. I wanted the truth out in the open, with names and consequences. There's a strange calm that settles in after a betrayal so deep it rewires your sense of reality. When I saw my mother's name on those audit documents, not implied, not assumed, but signed, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel rage. I felt still, like standing in the eye of a storm, watching everything I'd once believed get torn apart at a distance. I printed everything. The audit summary, the account histories, the authorization logs. I spread them across my kitchen table and stared at them until the words stopped blurring together. Fiduciary misconduct, unauthorized distributions, concealment of assets. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate. I called Noah that night. If I was going to do this, I needed one person in the family I could trust. He came over with takeout and a 6-pack, and we sat on the floor surrounded by paperwork like we were planning a heist. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly. "Because once this goes public, there's no undoing it." I nodded. There was no undoing Thanksgiving. Over the next few days, we worked methodically. No emotion, no dramatics, just facts. We built a timeline when the money started moving, when Grandpa's health declined, when Evan's business appeared, when Lucas entered the picture. Every piece lined up too cleanly to be coincidence. Then I reached out to an old college friend, Danielle Mercer, probate attorney, sharp, unflappable. She listened, took notes, asked questions that cut straight through my lingering doubts. At the end, she leaned back and said, "You're sitting on enough to trigger a full forensic investigation." "I'm not trying to ruin anyone," I said, even as I knew how hollow it sounded. Danielle smiled slightly. "Accountability feels like ruin to people who've never faced it." We drafted a formal complaint. I didn't file it. Not yet. First, I wanted the truth to breathe. I posted a single vague status on my rarely used social media account. Funny how some people preach family values while stealing from a dead man's trust fund. Receipts matter. Within an hour, Evan messaged me. "What is your problem?" I waited 10 minutes before replying. "You should talk to Mom." 2 days later, Evan uploaded a video rant to his channel. Tearful, defensive, talking about toxic relatives and jealousy. Comments were turned off within an hour, but not before a few sponsors started asking questions. That was when my phone rang. My mother. Her voice was careful, measured. "I think we should talk in person," she said. "About the estate. About everything." "I'd rather have my attorney present," I replied. A pause. "You got a lawyer?" "I had to," I said, after what I found. Another pause, longer this time. "We're family," she said. "You didn't have to go this far." I almost laughed. "You went further," I said quietly. She sighed. "What do you want?" There it was. Not an apology, not regret, just negotiation. I didn't answer. Because what I wanted wasn't money or revenge. I wanted silence to stop protecting them. So I made one final call. A former client of mine hosted a modest podcast, Family Disputes, Legal Drama, Quiet Exposes. Not huge, but respected. When I told him the story, anonymized, backed with documentation, he didn't hesitate. "This is real," he said. "If you're ready, we can run it." I sent him everything. Redacted names, blurred documents, clean narration. And right before the episode went live, I sent one last message to the family group chat. "You should listen to this." Then I turned my phone off and waited. I didn't turn my phone back on for 8 hours. I went for a walk instead. Not the distracted kind where you scroll and wander, but a deliberate one. Through the park, past the community theater, down a quiet street where the trees were bare and the air smelled like cold pavement. I sat on a bench by a frozen pond and let the quiet settle into my bones. For months, everything had been noise, accusations, secrets, guilt, restraint. That silence felt earned. When I finally powered my phone back on, it was chaos. Missed calls, voicemails, texts stacked on top of each other so fast the screen lagged. The family group chat had over 100 unread messages. Half of them were already deleted, but what remained was raw panic. Evan called first. I declined. Then a text appeared. "You have no idea what you just did." I didn't reply, because I knew exactly what I'd done. The podcast episode had gone live that morning. 58 minutes. Calm, methodical, no theatrics. Just a story about a family matriarch who abused her role as executor, a favored son who quietly siphoned money meant for everyone, and a daughter who stayed silent until the day they shut the door in her face. Names were redacted, but context is louder than names. By evening, the episode had over 40,000 plays. A local legal blog picked it up. Then a community Facebook group dedicated to probate issues started sharing screenshots and speculating. People connected the dots faster than I expected. Apparently, when a family markets itself as perfect for decades, the fall draws an audience. At 9:03 p.m., Danielle called me. "They're scrambling," she said, barely hiding her satisfaction. "The firm that co-managed the estate just contacted the court. They're initiating a full fiduciary review." I leaned back in my chair. So it's happening. It's happening. Wave 1 hit hard. Within 2 weeks, my mother was formally removed as executor. A third-party fiduciary was appointed. The house my grandfather had placed in trust was frozen. No refinancing, no credit lines, no quiet withdrawals. Evan was ordered to cease any further access to estate funds and submit a formal statement regarding the unauthorized checks. His lawyer tried to argue verbal permission. Emails, don't forget. Lucas's cooperation sealed it. Screenshots, messages, dates. The paper trail was airtight. The court ordered restitution. With interest. Wave 2 was social. My mother's church quietly removed her from the financial committee. Friends stopped calling. Invitations dried up. The people who once praised her discipline suddenly found reasons to stay busy. Evan posted another video, longer this time, crying, talking about betrayal and mental health. Comments were disabled within minutes. Sponsors pulled out within days. His follower count dropped by half. Lucas moved to Arizona. Smart. Wave 3 was personal. A handwritten letter arrived at my apartment one night. 5 pages. My mother's cursive, familiar, looping, unmistakable. It was an apology that never actually apologized. "I did what I thought was best. You'll understand when you're a parent. You've caused a lot of pain." Near the end, one line stood out. "Was it worth it?" I read it twice. Then I laughed. Not cruelly, not bitterly. Just with the quiet understanding that yes, it was. Because silence had cost me more than truth ever could. I didn't reply. I wasn't obligated to. Instead, I met with Danielle one last time and made a decision that surprised everyone. I requested that my share of the estate be donated to a scholarship fund in my grandfather's name for kids aging out of foster care. He'd grown up in the system. It felt right. I kept nothing. Not the money, not the house, not the illusion. What I kept was something better. Myself. The loud part ended quickly. Once the court stepped in, once the money was frozen and the story stopped being theoretical, there wasn't much left for anyone to argue about. Facts don't care how carefully you've curated your image. They don't flinch when you cry on camera. They don't soften because you're someone's mother. The fiduciary review moved faster than anyone expected. Paperwork has a way of accelerating when there's public pressure behind it. By spring, everything was finalized. The estate was restructured. Restitution plans were enforced. The house my grandfather had meant to be a temporary anchor was listed and sold under court supervision. I never went inside again. I didn't need to. People asked me if I felt victorious. I didn't. Victory implies competition, and I'd never wanted to win against my family. I just wanted to stop losing myself to their version of events. Noah and I still talk. Every Sunday, coffee at the same quiet place near the river. Sometimes we talk about work. Sometimes about nothing at all. Sometimes about Grandpa, the way he used to hum, while fixing things the way he pretended not to notice when Evan monopolized the room. One afternoon, Noah said, "You know, I think he knew. I think he trusted you to handle it if things went wrong." I nodded. I think so too. My mother never called again. The last I heard, she'd moved closer to one of her sisters, a quieter town, fewer questions. Evan disappeared from the internet for a while. When he resurfaced, his posts were careful, smaller, less certain. And me, I kept freelancing. Built a client list I was proud of. Took breaks without guilt. Learned how to say no without explaining myself. Therapy taught me something no one in my family ever did. Love that demands silence isn't love. Loyalty that requires self-erasure is just fear in disguise. The last thing I did was frame one document. Not a court ruling, not a receipt. A handwritten note from Grandpa I'd found buried in an old backup folder. No date, just a few words. "You always show up, even when no one notices." I hung it above my desk. That's how it ended. Not with a scream, not with a courtroom spectacle, not with revenge. Just the truth exposed. A family forced to face itself, and a woman who finally stopped shrinking to fit other people's comfort.